Hi, I'm Kiki, an imperfect ally. You may have noticed, or probably not because I have 8 subscribers, but if you're one of them, you may have noticed that this channel's been dark for a while. And that's due to a couple of different things. Some classic quarantine depression, just sort of a natural tendency I have to cycle through hobbies and get bored quickly. But mostly the feeling that I was just kind of shouting into the void because I have 8 subscribers. But today I've been inspired by domestic terrorism and treason to come out of retirement because I have so much to say about what happened yesterday in DC. I'd like to start by saying that it is frankly disgusting to me and completely un-American to storm the US Capitol. I would think that would go without saying, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I, along with the majority of Americans, were disappointed in the results of the last presidential election in 2016. And yet, I don't think any groups considered storming the US Capitol because that's treason. And if you participate in your democratic process and call yourself a patriot and are proud to be an American, I would think that treason wouldn't be on the table for you. Now, I know that there's a lot of people who are hesitant to call it treason, and I've seen a lot of discussions about people's right to protest. And it is true that our First Amendment rights and our ability to demonstrate is one of the beautiful things about being Americans and living in this country. But that was not a protest. That was a riot and an insurrection and an attempted government coup, quite frankly. So we don't have the right to do that. I find it rather telling that the people who are discussing Americans' right to protest are the same folks who were really quick to condemn the riots and destruction of property that we were seeing this summer. And the comparisons between this event and Black Lives Matter protests are pretty infuriating to me, and I'll come back to that later. But first, I want to draw your attention to the fact that the US Capitol has not been breached since 1814. So why now? What's the difference? What is the changing variable? Now, it will probably come as no surprise to anyone that I'm not a Trump supporter. But over the last 4 years, I've really tried my hardest not to immediately blame him directly for every horrible thing that's happened in this country. Because, quite frankly, he's just one idiot. But in this particular case, the variable is clear. In every other election, every 4 years for the last 200 years, we have managed a peaceful transition of power in this country. Whether it was a 1-term president, a 2-term president, the party was flipping, which it often was, we were always able to pass through a new administration without incident. And that is something that this president refused to guarantee or even agree to at any point. So this terrifying and unprecedented behavior is a direct result of his lies and inciting tweets. Tweets! I'm very happy about the Twitter ban, but it's a little too late, if you know what I mean. And frankly, for me, one of the saddest parts about yesterday's events was that I wasn't surprised. That this behavior, his rhetoric, and the way that he is so willing to incite violence and unwilling to denounce racism and bigotry meant that this was a long time coming. I read a lot of tweets that people are more surprised that this hadn't happened sooner. Of course, we have seen plenty of unprecedented violence in this past year. And that brings me to the inevitable and infuriating comparisons between yesterday's events and the wave of Black Lives Matter protests that we saw over the summer in response to unending police brutality against Black Americans. Quite frankly, yesterday's events proved the point of the Black Lives Matter movement, but if you don't believe that, then you just aren't going to. This is a topic that I have discussed at length on this channel, so I don't want to dive too deep into the difference in the motivations and what's justifiable and what's understandable in these different protests. But what I do want to talk about is the difference between the way that the protesters were treated. Plenty of people who are smarter and more eloquent and more qualified than me have discussed this at length on the internet. But one of the most striking incidences for me was when a colleague of mine acknowledged that if she or many of my other Black colleagues had been involved in behavior like that, that they likely wouldn't be alive today to tell the tale. Cut to me openly weeping on a staff-wide Zoom call, but I digress. But that's the crux of my point. That for people that I love and respect, this is a matter of life and death, and it really isn't for me. As Joy-Ann Reid from MSNBC so brilliantly put it, white Americans are never afraid of the police. And it's true, even when they're committing crimes. They're so unafraid of the police that they stormed a US government building, a symbol of the nation that they claim to be so proud to be from, a symbol of the democracy that they claim to be trying to protect. Because in their hearts, they knew that the police weren't going to hurt them. And I don't want to be flip about the deaths that occurred yesterday, because any loss of life is tragic. But I'm 100% convinced that the bloodshed would have been much greater if the mob hadn't been white. And once again, if you don't already believe that, you're not going to believe that because I said it, but I know it to be true. I only learned today of the nooses that were also erected outside of the Capitol building as part of this protest. And it's a direct attack and a direct threat on Black lives. And if you don't see that, when was the last time a noose was used for any sort of legitimate death penalty? It's a reference to lynching. That's it. It is. To ignore that race is a factor in all of this is willful ignorance at best. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been quiet for a while. I've been working really hard to remain optimistic this year and to not complain too much or too loudly about all of the crazy things that have happened, from the election to COVID and beyond. And often when I'm in conversations with friends and loved ones who are getting really worked up about these issues, I really try to be the voice of hope that things are getting better, and not just railing and yelling about. Anyway, I try not to stress about the things that I can't control, and I try not to let the things of the world get to me every single day and get me down, and I try to remain optimistic. I spent all yesterday evening crying, and I couldn't help it. I would stop and look at a tweet, or I was trying to watch something light to distract myself from how I was feeling, and I just couldn't stop crying. And that's not really me. I try to remain in control of my emotions. This channel is not proof of that, but I am usually pretty even-keeled. I just couldn't stop crying because this felt like an actual blow to our democracy. It was the kind of shocking imagery that you don't ever expect to see in America, a free country, a rich country of people who have the opportunity to participate in their democracy, that no one pulled the wool over anybody's eyes. We had a fair and free election like we do every single time, and to have riots and destruction of government property because you're mad your candidate lost, it's unfathomable to me. I've lost control of my emotions again. But as infuriated as I am, the thing I am most of all is sad and heartbroken. I am sad that I've seen Americans trying to defend domestic terrorism and treason. And I'm sad that there are Americans who are trying to explain it away as an insane conspiracy theory that makes absolutely no sense if you even just pull on one thread. So just sidebar, if you're out there going like, oh, it was all BLM and Antifa, like, come on. Come on. For real. Once again, I'm getting myself too worked up, and I think I'm gonna have to stop here because I'm gonna start going in like a rage circle. I don't really feel like spreading love right now, but I would still advise you to lead with it when you have to have inevitable conversations with friends and family about this situation. It is frankly embarrassing that we are divided enough as a nation that this is even up for debate, that whether or not that was acceptable behavior. I'm so like hyperventilating. I'm upset. I guess the main takeaway for me today is that if you are still on the All Lives Matter train and you really don't believe that police brutality is disproportionately perpetrated against Black people, just take another look at the situation that happened yesterday. I saw some really great tweets about how white privilege is storming a government building and being able to take selfies with the police inside, selfies at Nancy Pelosi's desk and steal her mail, which is a federal crime. Aside from that's all federal crimes. Sorry. If you're able to do that and walk away uninjured and with your life, and when there are peaceful protests that have happened in this country that have been broken up by rubber bullets and tear gas and loss of life, you have to acknowledge your privilege. I just think about it. Go Warnock, go Ossoff. Very happy for Georgia. I'm looking forward to Inauguration Day, although I'm very scared. I'm scared. I'm praying for this country and for people to peacefully accept what they cannot change. You cannot change it. You can't change it. It was a fair election, and you can be upset, and you can rail on Facebook all you want, and you can, unfriend your relatives. You can do all the things. You can threaten to leave the country. All the things we did 4 years ago. You can do all of it. I don't care. But the violence is unacceptable. The treason and terrorism is unacceptable. They had to escort Mike Pence out of the Capitol building. Mike Pence, your own guy. He's your own guy. I've lost my thread. I don't know. This one really, it hits different. I think you can understand why. I'm concerned for the future of our democracy. I am concerned for our president-elect and our vice president-elect as they try to clean up the mess that this country has become over the last 4 years. Sorry. But the people have spoken, and we don't want Trump to be the president anymore. And I'm sorry that you feel differently. I think that you will find in a few years that this is actually the best case scenario for all Americans. I don't really know why people think that the Democratic Party is like against your freedom. It's like kind of counterintuitive to me, but that whatever. I'm like fully rambling now. I have like an outline, and I've only had half a beer, so I don't know why I'm all over the place. Anyway, avoid unnecessary social media fights if you can, but if you have people in your life that you sense are open and softened to the possibility that, the truth is the truth, I encourage you to lead with love. I've really had to have some conversations with myself about not calling people stupid, so I'm not above it, obviously, but change is never going to happen if we're not kind to one another. I know that there are a lot of people in my own personal political camps who get upset when people advocate for kindness no matter what, because it can be really hard to be kind to people who don't believe that you have basic human rights, and I can understand that, but kindness is the way forward. As Van Jones said on the day that we finally called the election, this proves that character matters. And it does. Character matters, and the way that you treat people with whom you disagree does matter. I'm not saying don't call them out. I'm not saying don't be honest, but when they go low, we go high. Keep the attacks above the belt, or don't attack at all. Keep the criticisms above the belt, and remember and recognize that your one Facebook interaction is not going to change anybody's mind. It is both arrogant and unintelligent to believe that that is the case. Whatever. I don't. Stay safe. God bless America. God bless our democracy. God bless you, regardless of your opinion. And Happy New Year.